So today we're going to talk about a really interesting subject. This is part 3 of our Sacred Feminine series. We started with presence, just talking about how the sacred feminine shows up in the world, like historical examples, religious examples, etc. And then we talked about power and the power of the sacred feminine. And I think in both of those discussions, I was less comfortable than I think I am with this one. And this one's the spiciest. So I'm really looking forward. We'll see. Maybe not. But today we're going to talk about pleasure. So the sacred feminine and pleasure and how that is expressed. And so I think when you say pleasure and sacred feminine, the arrow directly points at sex. But pleasure is not just sex, clearly. So I thought we'd start by talking a little bit about sensuality, being embodied, and experiencing the world through your senses can be very pleasurable. And then, of course, I do think sexuality is a piece of that puzzle. So we'll talk a little bit about that and maybe take some little side forays into, sexual repression and purity culture and some of these things, because I think those would be interesting to talk about and certainly have been the experience of, I've had some experience with, and a lot of people I know have. And so I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on that. So let's talk about sensuality first, because I love sensuality.
Okay.
It's the best, right?
I'm following your lead today.
Biting into a really ripe peach and just enjoying how fabulous it tastes, or, feeling sunlight on your skin, that feeling of when you get in bed and your sheets are so soft and cozy. I love all those things.
Those all sound delicious.
Don't they?
Yes, yeah.
I definitely veer towards the cozy in my sensuality examples, as you can tell. But, moving your body, some people would find a lot of pleasure in the accomplishment of pushing themselves to their limits, like maybe hiking to the top for a beautiful view. There are a lot of embodied experiences of pleasure through all these senses that we have. So I don't know. When you think about sensuality in that construct, how do you think about it?
Yeah, well, it's such a great topic, and you know me, I'm going to go theological first, so thanks for bearing with me. But
let's do it.
Over the decades, over the centuries, what mattered, spirit or matter? And was your body something to repress and control and tame, or was it something to enjoy? And it took, I think it took the church a long time to get that matter matters. You have a body for the reason. I've always told my kids, your body is the part of the universe that you were given to care for. Yes, you're responsible. I'm a big creation care person, but it's you've got your own special stardust in this meat suit, right? Temporarily. So make the best of it. And it took me personally, a long time in my life, probably within the last 15 years or so, to be more in my body. I think my tendency is to be very intellectual, and I love to debate and talk about stuff and read, and I love nature, but that was just kind of like a missing piece. I don't even know how to describe it, but so I've come, I think, a very long way in appreciating my body. I always appreciated it because I was able to have children, and because, to your point, I can go stand in the sun and I can lay in the grass, which, I do often, and I can hug a tree and all the things that I love to do. But just understanding what a gift that really is and how much it matters, almost as much as the other elements, the other gifts that we've been given, so that was a process for me to kind of get there. Which doesn't mean I don't love sex, because I do, but it's a whole different thing, it's a whole different thing when you realize, oh wait, this matters. So anyway.
Yes. No, I agree. I'm still learning how to be more embodied more of the time, for sure. For years, I also thought of my body as a thing that carried my brain around.
Yeah, that's what exactly. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I was very, divorced from it in many ways. And yeah, probably my favorite when I just think about laying in the sun and feeling the sun warm me. That's one of my favorite examples. Like I can imagine that and it's just calming to me. So,
That's why I have
um,
a hammock. I always have a hammock in my backyard for just to do that, to go because I have spiders in my grass, so I'm kind of off the grass right now. Anyway, yeah, it's like it's one of the joys of being alive.
yes, it's kind of the reason we're here is to experience this
Yeah,
through our body, through
yeah,
this being that we have. Yeah. I always love the way you phrase things though. And then obviously sexuality is another way we experience our bodies, right? And live this life and also connect with other people in terms of, that intimacy, that level of intimacy. But to be clear, intimacy can be, and pleasurable intimacy can involve, connecting with people on a deeper level. It doesn't have to be sexual. That can be very pleasurable as well. Like this idea of being seen and seeing someone else and having a moment where you share, some level of vulnerability. Those are all things that can be pleasurable as well that are not inherently sexual.
yeah. I mean, it's all good. Like we've
Yeah.
talked about this in the sense that I think the meaning of life is to just live, to experience, to feel it all. And that is all the sensual aspects, of it, whether physical or emotional or whatnot. Yeah. So,
Yes. So if we think about pleasure as divine, we can manifest it as we've talked about in breath and stillness. We've talked a lot about meditation and breathing, movement, embodiment, like how we move our bodies. Some people, I'm a horrible dancer, for example, but it does feel good to move your body. So you can find lots of ways to do that. And some people love to dance and are very joyous about it. I
well,
am not, but
I'm with you. I was at an ashram in California. Oh my gosh, probably 20 years ago, and it was all on this whole concept of matter and being in your body. Like I don't think I really realized what the key topic was, or I probably wouldn't have gone, but I'm glad I did. Anyway, and it was about this idea that your body has a voice and being in tune with your body and matter matters. And they would make us get up and like do these goofy like moves and dances. And I was like, this is no. I was like, this is not. But just letting go and committing to it on the other side, I was like, oh, it was like an interesting experience. So,
I'm sure it was very freeing because I feel like when you allow yourself to, it's letting go of your inner critic, right? You're just like, I don't care what I look like right now. I'm just going to experience it and feel it.
yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
not, yeah, I'm definitely not great at that.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, when
always
you look
like,
around and other people are dancing worse than you, okay, okay.
you looked around the room and you were like, I think I'm going
Well,
to be okay. It's all right.
so
We're all in the
still
same
a
boat.
lot of growth needs to happen over here.
I like it. And I like this idea too of, I have rituals. I'm really bad at consistency, of course, as we've talked about many times. But during the pandemic, one of my rituals when, I was by myself in my house a lot, or, just me and my dog, occasionally half the time, me, my son, and my dog, um, I developed a ritual at night where I would make myself a pot of herbal tea, and I would put it in this teapot that was sent by my father to my mother from Hong Kong when he was on R&R during Vietnam. And I would pour it into my fanciest teacup that I never used before the pandemic. It sat on a shelf because I was afraid to use it because it cost so much money. And I would sit and just have tea, and it was my ritual. It was all of those things. So it was the act of sitting and reflecting, smelling the tea, enjoying it, using, pieces that had history, reminding myself of those connections, so ritual can be very powerful in terms of pleasure as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I probably talk about meditation too much, but the presence that it brings and the grounding that it brings has absolutely gone a really long way to connect me with my body, in addition to other things for sure. And that is such a ritual for me. Like I have my three things I have to do every morning, and if I don't do them, I have to really keep my mouth shut. I have to really watch, the rest of the day. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of pleasure and comfort and security in ritual. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So a good thing to think about as I was, preparing for this discussion, I thought, man, I've really let some of the pleasurable ritual in my life, take a back seat. I've been more focused on necessity, right? So just logistical ritual, the things I have to get done. So now I'm gonna go figure that out, put some more back in. And then, creativity, expression, can be a form of pleasure. How you know, um, express yourself in terms of like if you love to paint or create or decorate or throw parties, or there are a lot of ways that creativity and expression can come out, and that can be highly pleasurable as well, whether it's shared with other people or something that you do on your own
Or on a podcast.
or on a podcast. It's crazy. It is so fun.
It is so fun.
We love it. And then transcendence, awe, ecstasy, beautiful sunset, nature, but obviously can also be in relation to other people. And that's where we get more into like that intimate connection and emotional depth that can be, feed your soul and be very pleasurable in and of itself. And, can even verge into, this idea of sex as a sacred act. Certainly, something that I think is interesting to discuss, because the sexual part of pleasure is highly loaded. Everyone's on board, I think, with the sensual side of pleasure. Or, well, some people maybe not. There are people who abstain, like they're punishing themselves for some reason. But for the most part, people are pretty okay with the sensual side. I think it's when you get to sexuality, and especially female sexuality, that it becomes, a much more loaded and nuanced topic in culture. Is that fair?
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. And it's so stereotyped in many ways. Like as a woman, what kind of sexual being are you going to be? Are you the ingenue? Are you the temptress? Are you the wife? Are you the mistress? Like what? Like men just get to be men in that regard, right? They get to just want without definition, and like you have to figure out what kind of role you're going to play. And I find it's so interesting with different men, the different role I end up playing. It's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm kind of this over here, and I'm kind of that over there, and like, like it's, don't get the wrong idea. It's not like there's a line out my front door, but it's like it's just the dynamics, the emotional baggage that comes, into the relationship, and there was, I don't even remember where I first read or heard about this, but sex is a sacred act, especially in a marriage, which I think is a sacred thing, and redefining or expanding the concept of this is my body given for you, and just adding a whole nother level of sacredness or holiness to the relationship and to the intimacy, which I thought was a really fantastic way to think about it.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of things I wanted to talk about. So let's break them down. One is that women, are more defined by their sexuality than men, for sure. And then this idea of purity also being in some ways tied to it. So women's sexual choices are more scrutinized. And this idea that purity equates with level of spirituality, especially, early in life, right? So this idea that we should refrain from extramarital sex, or that it's a blemish on our reputation or on our soul. And I think that it's not exclusively a, a female restriction, because you definitely see it obviously like in the Roman Catholic Church. So you're, to your point, this idea that um, the body is sinful and spirituality must be divorced from the body. You definitely see that in like Roman Catholicism, right, where priests and nuns abstain from sexual relationships or romantic relationships to preserve that purity. So
Well, just forgive me, real quick note on that. I mean, the church did it with priests initially to keep the wealth at the church, because if the priest was having children, then they would have a claim to the inheritance. So, power and money get mixed up in that kind of historical story for sure. But yeah.
Yes, agreed. And in a lot of, yeah, and let's definitely talk about how power plays into restricting sexuality, because there's a lot there to explore. But the other piece that I wanted to talk about that you mentioned was, this idea of kind of sacred union. And so I think that a good example for me, when my son, as he was growing up, I would always say to him, when we talked a lot about sex at age appropriate, goalposts, and in a way that made sense based on how old he was. But, as he got older, I would say, protect your heart, protect your health, protect your future, which is kind of a defensive position, but I thought, was me trying to put it in a nutshell to convey like how I thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
But he and I, we attended a wedding where purity was discussed in the ceremony.
Oh, really?
And yeah. And as we were driving home, it actually prompted a really, really good discussion that from an angle that we had never talked about, this topic. And so we talked a lot about intentionality and value, and how you value, what you share, vulnerability that you share with another person, valuing, that type of interaction, who you choose to share that with, and how you experience it in a way that's hopefully going to be a much more positive experience for both the people involved. And so I felt like it was really helpful, because, that wasn't part of the world that we live in, but it was something that, as we encountered it, led to a much deeper discussion than we had ever had.
Yeah. Well, this purity culture, I have no concept. Like, what? Like, never intersected that, never have run into anybody who embraced that, or, I mean, that I can think of that was a part of that. And if it comes down to treating yourself as sacred and honoring yourself, I would 100% endorse that. But if it's, I don't know, some sort of artificially inflicted moral code, not down with that.
Yeah, and I think it can be both, honestly. I think it has two sides to the coin. And I grew up in more of a purity culture, and I have friends who, even more so, because they stayed in it longer. As we've discussed, I left the church when I was 16, and I remember being in youth group Sunday school class and being broken up into, like the girls went in one room, the boys went in another room, and that was the topic. And it was really clear to me that not only were we responsible for protecting our purity as young girls, as early stage women, but we were also pretty much responsible for what the guys were up to too, because there was this underlying acknowledgement of boys will be boys, and so it was up to us to hold the line. And so, yeah, I was very much not on board with that.
Yeah, boys will be boys still rattles through today, doesn't it? Even
Yes.
the White House, right?
Yes. Locker room talk.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. There's a lot there. And I think that, obviously we are two middle-aged women who are starting a podcast that probably is going to have limited reach initially, but
Secure outlet.
but women talking about sexuality on the internet, whew, are they get a lot of feedback, and uh, it is not uh, all positive, and it can be misconstrued in a lot of ways. So there's that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand why anything is taboo to discuss. And to your point about the conversations you had with your son, the right age, the right topic, the right depth, like, it's when we don't talk about things that it goes south, that it becomes repressed and it becomes a part of the shadow. And then it expresses itself in unhealthy ways. So to me, it's crazy. It's nuts that we can't talk about stuff, and that it is so polarizing, and it scratches this control and power wound that, I'll just say society or some people feel the need to control. It's threatening. It is threatening. And it's only threatening because you're threatened by it, because you can't handle it, because you have an issue that you're not able to handle on your own. And so you need society to help you handle it. And I didn't sign up for that. So
Yes.
log off the podcast.
Well, yes. Yes, exactly. And I think that I am always distrustful of people who need a lot of rules.
Yes. You don't, if you need a lot of rules, you don't have your own inner compass.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what it tells me. If you need a lot of rules, and then also if you feel like your responsibility is to enforce your own code of conduct on other people, uh, yeah, both of those are huge red flags to me. Just because, we all have different views on how to handle things, but specifically related to our body. What? How do you have any right to tell me what to do with my own body? Come on. And how we view things will change over time. We all have the ability to change our mind at any time on how we want to treat our body, how we want to use our body. It's freedom to me, it's freedom at its most basic level.
Yes.
Autonomy.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, but sexuality, so we've talked about a little bit, we've touched on some of the limitations and how culture can treat it, but it can be inherently liberating as well. It is an act that is, I'm trying to think of a good way to say it.
Just
So
say it. Just say it.
it's an act that is not something you share with the vast majority of people who will ever know you. It's something that's very specific. It's very much just for you and, whoever you're with. So I think that it's interesting because we operate in a world where we know that almost everyone is having sex or has had sex at some point, right? It's just a basic. We wouldn't be here without it. It's how we function. But I feel like we can be very divorced from it. And to your point, not talk about it, repress it, keep it in a box, keep it very separate. And then it becomes something that is much more loaded than maybe it should be.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. And you're either liberated or not. You're either in command of your spirit and body and soul and what personality, or you're not. Not that anyone's perfect, but you can't control some aspects and ignore other aspects and expect to be a wholly integrated person, and everybody's journey is different, and everybody has, graces they're born with, things that are easy for them, and then things that are hard, and everybody's are different, and that's okay. Everybody's journey is different. But yeah, it's the control piece that really sends it astray and fuels. Look at the porn industry, right? I mean, holy cow, that is repression monetized. It's just unbelievable, the secrets that are being kept and the vows that are being broken, from midnight to 3 a.m. at a minimum, right? So it's a really sad state. Like this Puritan culture that we live in America, I mean, maybe it served a purpose back in the day, but you know, it's very repressive for sure.
Yeah, and I think your point is well made in that, you know, you see religious figures who are toppled by sexual scandal, etc. And I think, and you know, and that's not exclusive, of course, to leaders, business leaders, everyone, right? Um, but it can bubble up in ways that are highly destructive, and that is because we've decided that certain aspects are acceptable and certain aspects are unacceptable. And in a lot of cases, the reasoning behind that, to your point, is sometimes about power and money. And, um, you know, at its most basic level, controlling women's sexuality was to ensure paternity, understanding, you know, is this my child? Am I responsible for it, etc. You know, before we had the advent of paternity tests and all that good stuff. Um, and so, you know, marriage was a contract. It was often a financial arrangement, in some cases, a political arrangement. And paternity was kind of central to a lot of that um, normalization or codification of intimate relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. But on the flip side, and this was probably you're not gonna like this. I'm not sure that that like the sexual revolution, or in particular, the, women's movement, I don't think that sort of went the way that everybody thought it was gonna go. Um, and so I'm all for autonomy and, individual decision making and, answer to your God. But I'm not sure it all worked out so good. This whole
No, I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I mean, there were definitely benefits in terms of you saw a lot of positive impact around, you know, women feeling freer to express their sexuality. I do think that, you know, I would assume, obviously I wasn't alive at that time, but I've read a lot about it. I've definitely heard accounts from women who lived through that time, and free love almost became like an excuse for bad behavior or behavior that was in some ways almost self-harm for the people who participated in it. So yeah, I think we'd love to think that it was all like peace, love, and flowers and positivity. But, you know, anytime you have um, a sexual situation, there is this potential for people to cross lines or view an interaction very distinctly and differently. So I think that's a lot of what you saw in, like, you know, obviously with Me Too, there were instances that were very clearly, you know, sexual abuse, sexual assault, etc. And then I think we also saw people who would have a consensual sexual encounter, but have a very different view on that encounter. So, like, it's complicated. It's very, very complicated. And how you feel about it in the moment versus how you feel about it afterwards or a year later it can be a complex topic.
Yeah, right. Which again, the root is, and none of us are perfect, but you use the word intentionality, right? I would say, knowing who you are and knowing what your own moral code is, right? Is one of the most foundational things I think anybody's responsible for. Thinking for yourself, figuring it out for yourself, what's in my heart, what am I called to do, and how am I going to live in accordance with that, right? And have intentionality, which isn't to say you can't get lost in a moment. It happens, right? But just having that internal compass in all aspects of life.
Right.
Going into a meeting where this meeting is going to go south and I'm going to be pissed in about 5 minutes. But my intent, like, that's not how I want to behave. Or what kind of mom do I want to be? What kind of partner do I want to be? What kind of friend do I, just sort of, I think abdicating that sort of responsibility and expecting society to do it for you, it's a path to heartbreak. I think it's a path to heartbreak.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also important, that women in particular, but men also feel agency, right? That you feel agency in your own life, that you are centered in your own moral code, which may look different and probably will look different from other people's. Um, but that, yeah, you do have that grounding, and that you feel like you are in control of making those decisions. And, we've all been in circumstances or situations. I mean, definitely early in my life, I probably felt less agency in certain areas. It is something that hopefully you also develop over time a little bit more. But to all those, fully embodied, in control young people, yay. You're a step ahead. You're a step
That's
ahead.
right. That's right. Good for you. Don't give it up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so, religion, obviously, you've got Song of Songs, which I read when I was, I don't know, somewhere in my teenage years, and was like, wow, this is spicy. And a lot of religions do have reference to, I mean, if you think about like, probably Tantra is like a great example. Tantric sex is probably the most um, culturally accessible phrase that people have around, kind of a religious or approach to sex. I could see you blushing.
I'm not blushing. Just the lighting in here. You talk about like being in control. Tantric takes probably more control than I'm willing to give most times.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm certainly no expert on the topic at all, but I think that, it's frequently pops up in like movies or TV shows like Sex and the City or whatever, so people have some concept of it, whether they know what it is or not. But yeah, it does sound like a lot of work. I agree. um, so it's certainly not a topic that is ignored. And I think that it is discussed a lot, even in evangelical culture, in relation to, in the confines of a marriage, as being, obviously a key ingredient of a healthy marriage and all that good stuff. I do think that there's a little bit of a flip the switch in terms of you're supposed to be go from being a pure as the driven snow with no sexual thoughts in your head to suddenly having like an amazing sex life within your marriage. And I'm not sure how many people navigate that because that seems like a lot. Seems like an abrupt shift.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's something that is valued even in religions or cultures where there are more rules around it. I guess the best way to say it. So I think as long as you don't walk out of that experience with shame, and that's what I have. I have friends who were raised in who have talk about it with me all the time. I'm thinking of a friend of mine who's in her 30s, and she was raised in a religion that was, very heavy on the purity culture. She went to a religious college. She met her husband there, and she's still unwinding in her 30s all of the repression and shame around some of that was kind of embedded early on. And so I think that, for a lot of people, that is the journey. If that's where they start from, is really understanding how they can embrace their sexuality in a way that they don't feel like they're doing something wrong on some level. So it sounds like you didn't have that experience at all. We've talked about our opposite experiences so many times. People are like,
yes. Totally opposite. No, again, I not having grown up in the church, that there was no there's no, I was not exposed to purity culture at all. I was probably, I mean, maybe I was in my 30s when I even first heard about what's a purity ring. What are you talking about? Like, huh? Just even as a concept. And then I probably saw it on a TV show. Like, I don't, I just not something that I ever ran into. So, but, definitely I think as everybody does going through the educational system, I mean, you had your groups of girls, you had the good girls and you had the sluts and you had the popular girls and they got away with whatever. And so like that baggage, those labels that get thrown on women in such superficial ways, that was ever present. It's still present, unfortunately. I think being a teenage girl in the society today is maybe the hardest job going, right? You have to be everything. You have to be smart, but not smarter than the boys. You have to be beautiful, and sexy, but not slutty. You have to be athletic, and, like you have to be perfect. Like the box has just gotten so incredibly small and difficult, if you let outside thinking influence how you feel about yourself. And that's the real work, right? Is to, live from the inside out, not the outside in. I think it's incredibly difficult to be a young woman today. And it's, unbelievably difficult. You can put her feet on OnlyFans and make thousands of dollars a month. Like, why would I go to college? I could just, take pictures of my body parts and men will pay for it. Like, that's like a trippy head thing, right? Like, that really messes with what's my value, what's my role, like when your body is so commoditized. I don't even know what the right word is. I don't want to say sexualized because it's not, it's more than that now. I think it makes it so much harder to figure out what value do I really bring? What value do I really, am I bringing to this life and this world? So it's kind of crazy. I don't even know. Are there OnlyFans pages with men? Like, I don't even know. Like,
There are, Susan. I'm not saying I don't subscribe to any of them. I will
no
caveat.
judgment.
I
There's
just
been
know they
judgment as well.
exist. I know they exist. I
But
am
it's,
not a
yeah,
subscriber. Yes.
it's just
Yeah.
such a trap.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously amplified by social media, which is insane because you're seeing highly retouched pictures of perfection and all this other stuff. And it can be a pretty toxic stew. And then I think on the flip side to your point about porn, we're seeing the impact of isolation and access to stuff like porn in young men, right? And so that's also detrimental to their growth and understanding of intimacy and all those things. It's just, the other side of the coin. So in many ways, it's never been harder to develop healthy perspective around intimacy and sex because you have all of these things at your fingertips that can lead you in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Yeah. It just sort of cloud the view of going back to the beginning of what real sensuality and real pleasure is, right? And if you grow up eating sugar, you're not going to enjoy real fruits and vegetables. Like, you have to cultivate that taste. It's the same thing. It's, if you're all about the dopamine hit, then that long-term commitment situation, anticipation, whatever, is not going to satisfy. It's not going to, so it's really wiring brains in a very different way. And, for my kids, I just want their brains to be wired in a way that's healthy, right? And not influenced by, because it's harder to rewire, harder to rewire.
Yes, it's a much longer journey for sure. Well, one thing that I'm definitely going to make you blush on is we can also talk about how sexuality is not just, sex isn't just an act that you have with another person. It's also, sexuality is how you feel in the world, like that you feel like you're a sexual person, whether you're having sex or not, and what the benefits are of that. Just feeling alive in your body, feeling like that's a component of who you are and that you're comfortable with it. One of my favorite examples of this is when I was in perimenopause. I went to my OBGYN and we were talking about some of, like what I was experiencing. And one of the things I mentioned to her was low libido. And she was like, "Are you in a relationship right now?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Well, then you don't have to worry about that." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, I do. Like that's part of who I am. Like, what do you mean? Like, that's not just something I give to someone else or that only exists for someone else." It was just such a weird statement, you know? And
Yeah,
I mean, I did correct her in the appointment. I was like, "No, that is important to me."
I
And
bet you
she
did.
was like,
I bet
"Oh,
you
okay."
did. Wait a minute.
It was so funny. But I do think that, um, yeah, that there is this aspect of um, you know, owning your sexuality that is part of just embodiment, right?
Hmm.
It's part of everything we've talked about.
Hmm.
And whether you're in a sexual relationship or not, that still exists and still is part of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. It impacts how you walk down the street, right? And how you move and how you think and how you feel. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that there's anything else I want to talk about.
I'm like,
I was like,
this is
when I
really
did my
cool.
notes and research for this, of course, you know, like self pleasure is an aspect of this, and I'm not here to yuck anyone's yum. So whatever you like is great. But it's also a reality. I mean, that's part of, we talked about purity culture, but also just, making people feel bad or dirty for, self pleasure is also not helpful because most of us, not all of us, there are some people evidently who are not, but most of us are sexual beings. And so, that's certainly in many ways more constructive than, um, seeking out like high risk sexual encounters or other things that, have implications. Because we talked about intentionality, and intentionality, I think, is part of, it can be part of your values. It's part of your emotional health in terms of how you open up yourself and make yourself vulnerable to someone. But then there are also very real world implications to sex that you have to be conscious of. And, um, whether it's sexually transmitted diseases or unintended pregnancies or things like that, all of those things are factors that hopefully don't like you navigate um, in a way that you're able to meet your needs. But also, I find that some people who are super pro sex minimize those aspects and realities. And those are just realities that we all have to navigate.
Yeah. I mean, you have a son, I have a son and a daughter. Watching my son go through school, and college, and watching my daughter go through so very different in terms of like navigating their own
Mm-hmm.
right. And it it is something that it's boys get to be boys and girls have to deal with boys, and so um it's quite an education. And I think there's a reason that women mature faster than men. I think, that was a little biological gift there, to deal with some of the challenges and the realities of what it does mean to be embodied. And, you know, boys don't really have to grow up until they're in their 20s. And what's the average age of your first period now? Isn't it like 12? So at age 12, 13, somewhere right around in there, girls are suddenly very conscious of what their body is capable of, and the fact that they do have a woman's body. Um and instantly the consequences are right there, and the responsibility of carrying those consequences um is I think, and I know, very hard for young boys to understand. I think it's also very hard for older boys to understand kind of just the differences, and the requirements, uh, and, of being female, and then being female in this culture where, the push and the pull of being independent and still being considered the weaker sex and or sex, like the epitome of sex. It's a pretty challenging dynamic. to navigate. And not everybody's ready for it, right? And there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. Just, watching all the different girls that, have kind of come through my house, over the decades. Um, and I just think we should give each other grace, and I think we should help each other out. Um, you don't know what another person's been through. You just don't know. You don't know what their situation is. You don't know what they were taught or not taught. And so if we just would be kind to each other and give each other grace, and understand that one woman's journey is not the other woman's journey. And why do we have to judge each other? So I will tell you a funny story though, like when my kids got to like that age for like the talks and all this kind of stuff, they're pretty close together. I decided okay, I'm going to send him to sex ed at church. Okay. So the church put on this whole like sex ed thing. To this day, they tell me they're scarred. They're like, Mom, the things she told us still shock us. And I'm like, I thought like that was going to be like, that would be the safe way to do it. And still to this day, they'll be like, oh, Mom, if you only knew half the things she told us. I'm like, ooh. So, you just have to realize everyone's doing the best they can. Everyone's doing the best they can. So.
Oh, I am so curious about what was said in that sex ed session. Oh my goodness. At church, nonetheless. That's crazy.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember, being in health class, and when we got to the sex ed part of health class, being just horrified by having to hear this information from one of the coaches, just context, I think, you're just like uncomfortable. I'm in a room of my peers hearing this from a coach. It's but yeah, well, actually that probably prompts an interesting question, which is, what was your sex ed talk like? Did you ever get a sex ed talk from your parents or anyone when you were that age?
No, not really. Like I know, like my mom, we talked about some stuff, but me, I'm like, I got it. Like I could figure it out for myself, like I wasn't super receptive to it. So I think like most kids, it was health ed, which that's not really sex education. And then it was just friends and experimentation. Right. And sometimes I tend to learn my lessons the hard way. So, it's more just trial and error and just figuring things out, I guess, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I first received some education from an older cousin who informed me about the birds and the bees, but was not entirely accurate. I later learned. So a little misinformation early on.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then I believe I asked my mom about it at some point, and she borrowed a book from the neighbor and basically gave me a book to read because I was old enough to read at that point. And that was the extent. And then she was like, do you have any questions? No.
That's awesome.
That was about it.
Yeah.
So yes, I think we all navigate it and learn as we go a little bit, most of us. And I do think that, much like drinking, in my opinion, I do think you probably make better decisions the longer you wait to go down that path, just because you have more time to grow up and gain perspective. But to your point about not judging other people, I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges, and a great goal, because everyone's different. I mean, that's the thing. At one point I had someone I knew professionally, and this was I don't know, early 2000s, the early aughts, and it was a drinking culture. Anyway, you learn more about people when you're socializing and there's heavy drinking outside of a work situation. And I remember a colleague of mine who I was really close to, a guy, he told me, hey, this other guy at the party, he told me all about how he and his wife are swingers, and they have this room in their house and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, All right. Well, I didn't really need to know that about it. Like I could have gone forever without knowing this. And, but I was like, oh, if that works for them, great, versus a judgment of like, oh, they're sick, they're perverted. I mean, hey, it takes all kinds. And so if somebody, whatever anybody's into, if that's their decision and mutual consent, to me, okay,
Yeah.
good, more power to you.
Yep.
But I do think that all of us have been in a situation at some point where something like that pops up and we're like, whoa, that's weird. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
to your point of things you can make money on the internet doing.
Exactly. People pay for that?
Yeah, you're just like, that's a thing? I didn't
know.
even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah.
Well,
but I think to pull us full circle a little bit, obviously sex, super fun to talk about, even more fun to have in the right context, I would say. But, pleasure is definitely broader than that. And so I think it does come back to, as women, how do we feel embodied and how do we experience pleasure across all of the many ways that it can be experienced.
yes. Amen.
Nothing else to add?
I told you, like, this is you, baby. Like, I'm following your lead. I'm following your lead on this one.
So, as we've talked about, pleasure is pretty broad. It can include a lot. And everything from a delicious meal to, a foot fetish. But I love embarrassing you. It's so fun. But I do think I'm going to try that again because so I do think pleasure is important as this third pillar in our discussion because it does get at the root of embodiment and it is a source of power. Pleasure can be a source of power as well in terms of understanding how to experience, all of the good things in this world through our bodies and not just through our brains. So it's a much more loaded topic, I think, for women historically and even today. Although I will say I do think that it's something that we're all, men and women, struggle to navigate in a way that's healthy. So, healthy pleasure versus repression or self-destruction or destructive behavior, et cetera. Like you see people blow up their lives every day over this stuff. So just having a healthy perspective on it and being able to experience it is a very big win.
Yes. Well said. Well said. Well, thank you for another great discussion.
Yeah. It's a fun topic. And, if you can laugh and at least one of you can blush, then it's a great discussion. It's always good. And yeah, I'm sure we'll revisit the sacred feminine again. But I think it was just really helpful to talk through all of these things from archetypes to, power dynamics around the idea of sacredness and femininity together. And then, this idea of how it can be expressed through pleasure or experienced through pleasure, right?
Yeah.
It can be a very spiritual experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the challenge, or at least what I'm wrangling with, is being female and being divine, which all women are. What mythology am I living? What path am I on? Do I know? Do I have a path? Am I conscious of the path? Am I true to the path? I think those are good questions worth pondering.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Let's all go think about that.
Okay. All right. Watch some football. Okay.
See ya.